In 1502, Christopher Columbus's fourth Atlantic voyage brought him to the shores of Costa Rica, where he remained for 18 days, refitting his ships. Relations with the indigenous people became friendly enough that they brought him a number of items of gold, possibly prompting Columbus to name the land Rich Coast, although there is some dispute over the origin of the name. Other, more promising regions led Spain to neglect the area. However, and the first significant European settlement in what is now Costa Rica did not take place until much later. In 1564, the Spanish crown established the village of Cartago in the Central Valley, or the Meseta Central, as its first permanent settlement in the area. Theoretically, under the political jurisdiction of the Captain General of Guatemala and the spiritual guidance of the Bishop of Leon and Nicaragua, Costa Rica was largely ignored by both administrations. The absence of precious metals meant that the collection of few taxes from the ticos, as Costa Ricans are called. Consequently, Spain provided little help in developing the infrastructure of the province. Compared with other colonies, Costa Rica lacked the large labor force so essential in the Spanish scheme of conquest. The indigenous population drastically declined during and immediately following conquest. Any survivors resisted capture by disappearing into the forests rather than succumbing to the encomienda system. Lacking products for a great overseas market, the Costa Ricans eked out a subsistence economy based on the source of cocoa beans and tobacco. Hence, most people were small landowners with a close personal interest in local affairs. Historians often give credit to these developments for the growth of the democratic ideals that have become associated with Costa Rica. It should be noted, however, that some people who became rich established a small estate-based oligarchy, which provided political leadership well into the 20th century. When Mexico declared independence from Spain in 1821, Costa Rica, with other parts of Central America, such as Guatemala, Nicaragua, Honduras, and El Salvador, joined the short-lived, term-lived Mexican Empire. In 1823, Costa Rica helped create the United Provinces of Central America, which included the countries that I just stated. Disenchanted with the strife in the other four states of the Federation, severed its ties in 1838. A pattern of isolationism similar to that of the colonial period was reinforced. Indeed, Costa Ricans invariably showed little interest in the many attempts to revive the Federation throughout the 19th and most of the 20th century, until their country joined the Central American Common Market in 1962. Costa Rican leaders soon realized the potential for coffee cultivation and strove to promote coffee planting. From the 1840s, a constant stream of ox carts carried coffee from the Central Valley to Pacific ports and ships bound for Europe. This trade triggered British investment. Unlike sugar and indigo planters, coffee farmers with even small acreage could derive inadequate, if simple, existence, and Costa Ricans achieved a competitive advantage over coffee farmers in other Latin American countries. Costa Rica's policy of isolationism did not completely save it from foreign troubles. In 1825, the province of Guanacaste seceded from Nicaragua and joined Costa Rica, creating an issue that was contended until the Boundary Treaty of 1896. Political refugees from other Central American countries attempted and occasionally succeeded in involving Costa Rica in regional conflicts. Another danger developed when William Walker and his band of filibusters took over Nicaragua in 1856, threatening all of Central America. So Costa Rican troops participated in the Central American coalition force that drove Walker out of the region. The last decades of the 19th century were also marked by a gradual decline in the Roman Catholic Church activity in secular affairs. The Jesuits were expelled for a few years, cemeteries were secularized, and public education was expanded. In 1886, free public education became compulsory, and public schools, a museum, and a national library were founded. Though the government continued to support the church, the Constitution of 1871 provided for religious toleration, strengthening the tradition of democracy for which Costa Rica was to become famed throughout Latin America. Was the victory of 1889 of President Jose Joaquin Rodriguez in what is considered the first entirely free and honest election in all of Central America. In the early 20th century, Costa Rica and four other Central American republics established the Central American Court of Justice, the first international court with wide juridical powers. The headquarters were established in Cartago. but when the building was destroyed in the 1910 earthquake, the headquarters were moved to San Jose, which is the capital of Costa Rica. One of the court's landmark cases involved the Bryan Chamorro Treaty of 1916, which gave the United States permission to use the San Juan River, the border between Nicaragua and Costa Rica, as part of an interoceanic canal route. Costa Rica protested that Nicaragua was violating pre-existing treaty rights and that opening a route would threaten Costa Rican security. The claim was brought before the court, which ruled in Costa Rica's favor. However, Nicaragua refused to accept the ruling and withdrew from the court. Because of Nicaragua's withdrawal and an overall ineffective judicial procedure, the court dissolved in 1918 after 10 years in existence. However, the building in San Jose, which had been constructed with help from a donation by U.S. philanthropists, became the home of Costa Rica's Ministry of Foreign Relations. Costa Rica's boundary with Panama, originally with Colombia before Panamanian independence, was also in dispute. Arbitration awards by France and the United States in 1900 and 1914, respectively, had been generally favorable to Costa Rica, but were rejected by Panama. In 1921, Costa Rica attempted forcible occupation of this area on the Pacific coast, but was diverted by the intervention of the United States. Panama then evacuated the region, but relations between the two small states were not reestablished until 1928. In 1941, the governments finally reached an accord over the boundary. Costa Rica, like many Latin American countries, tried their hands at a dictatorship, which miserably failed, largely contributed to a potential U.S. intervention and just being very unpopular in the country. And Costa Rica continued its tradition of democratic elections and orderly government. Though also, like many Latin American countries, brief civil wars did occur, one of which in 1948 lasted about a month, which ended in governmental victory, but the Costa Rican military had to be abolished. The next few decades were similar to most countries, mainly deciding and testing many different presidential styles and trying to find out what works best for the country. And overall, Costa Rica was more prosperous than most in the area, and is regarded nowadays as a safe and economically stable country, similar to Panama. The last thing to note is on July 13, 2009, the International Court of Justice seemingly settled a long-time dispute between Nicaragua and Costa Rica over the latter's use of the San Juan River. In the ruling, the court granted Costa Rica the right of free navigation on the river, not only for commerce but also for tourism. The dispute boiled over again late 2010, however, when Nicaragua began dredging the river, Costa Rica protested that the action was a violation of its sovereignty and was causing environmental damage to the wetlands in the area. Nicaragua sent troops, and Costa Rica mobilized members of its police force. After the Organization of American States requested that both countries remove their forces from the area, Nicaragua refused. Costa Rica filed a brief with the International Court of Justice, which in March handed down a provisional ruling that instructed both sides to remove their forces. Nicaragua was allowed to continue dredging the river, but Costa Rica was permitted to send civilians to monitor potential environmental damage. Both sides claimed victory, and the matter was largely defused. That is it for the simplified history of Costa Rica.